Hey, all you fine folks out there. Today on The Perch, we have our special guest, Jared Cash with livenewmexico.com. It's an up-and-coming blog and photography website. The man has hiked all over New Mexico and knows nooks and crannies that typically are reserved for only the lizards and dirt. He brings to you on his blog tales from the rocky desert of New Mexico, and from those first-hand tales comes some stunning images you can find on his Facebook page at facebook.com/livenewmexico or on his website, livenewmexico.com. Follow us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/APOB media or join us on Patreon and get exclusive member-only content. That's patreon.com/APOB media and join to help us produce more podcasts, get better equipment, and keep finding people and highlighting and spotlighting wicked local artists as well as entrepreneurs, or maybe just somebody that's got something cool to say. All right, let's get to it. This is probably our least serious work so far. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. Welcome to A Perch of Birds, episode number 2. This is Mr. Jared Cash with Live New Mexico.
Cash money all day.
All day. He's coming to us live from the southern tip of the New Mexico. Who gives a fuck? Nobody gives a fuck. We're just in New Mexico.
We're like smack dab in the middle of New Mexico.
We're kind of in the center.
Nowhere near the tip.
I guess we're more southern than we are. Is there a tip to a square? It's kind of a square.
There's a bottom.
It's an oblong square.
And there's like a foot down there.
There is a foot. Are you making jokes again, bro? What do we talk about?
I didn't know we talked about anything. Was this pre-scripted?
It was.
I didn't read it.
You actually just lost your page. So my good buddy Jared here. We've been doing this podcast never. This is our first time. So
I think this is actually like a -3 times for me to do this podcast.
He's behind, so he has some making up to do. That's okay. Anything you want to bring up in the aftermath that he didn't talk about? Totally.
Go ahead and send an email 100%. to 666@thedevil.com.
Mm-hmm. He's got a garden and it flows with all of the fucks he gives about your opinions, America. So
anybody outside of America, though, it's totally legit. Everything you say. Everything you say.
Especially if you're in Ecuador. We like Mexico.
With that, New Zealand is also a good country.
Those Kiwis. They're not Aussies, they're Kiwis.
You know, I was at Walmart and I seen they had like baby kiwis, like little tiny kiwis.
Let me ask you a question though. Aren't baby kiwis kind of gross? Aren't they like sour?
I don't know. I've never tried one.
Would you prefer it? Let me ask you a question. Do you prefer ripe fruit or unripe fruit? This is actually a big question.
Well, in the current state of, America, what's going on these days, I'd actually prefer the fruit to be more ripe.
More ripe than less ripe.
More ripe than less ripe.
And if you had it less ripe,
I wouldn't eat it.
You wouldn't?
I would throw it out.
Damn.
And get rid of it.
Question of the
build
day.
A wall.
So your speciality is that you are an explorer of the New Mexican mountains. Which ones in particular would you say you prefer?
The taller ones, definitely.
Less than the hillier, shorter
hills
ones.
aren't. They're foothills are fine, but I like the taller mountains. I like the peaks. Twin Peaks.
Who doesn't like the peaks? No, but seriously. So okay. So you have a website, livenewmexico.com, right?
I have many things, and one of them is a website that I barely have anything going on. I put pictures on there, and it's a good way to learn about the things I do, or don't do, or pretend I do.
Or could be spending time doing other things, but he chooses to do these things, which are then recorded for the rest of us to see in all of our jealous because I got to say, every time I see you go up to a mountain and it's like some epicness, I'm definitely jealous.
I think every time I go to a mountain, there's just something, to me, there's something epic about it. Like even getting out of the car, if it takes me 6 hours to get there and I spend 15 minutes walking around, it still feels better than sitting at home on the couch thinking, man, I wish I could go hiking.
Right. Okay. So that kind of speaks to what you do with Live New Mexico, right? Like and not to say that you're doing something with it, but the fact that it's basically an eye behind you, an eye above you, and a word in your mind or what happened. Right?
It's just like my brand. That's just me. I live New Mexico. I use the website. I take the pictures. Sure. People can see how I see what I see.
So Jared and I have been friends for a long time.
I don't know if I'd say friends. I know the guy. I don't know.
There was a time when we owed each other $20 and we had to talk. So
and then the knife fight too.
Yeah,
and the gun battle was also pretty bad.
It got a little sticky whenever we had to bring in the leaders of our individual cartels, but we got over it.
It's funny that you use the word sticky.
Big of a deal.
I like how you use that word sticky.
No, seriously though. So Jared here has been probably exploring the Manzano Mountains in particular longer than anybody I know. That's in my circles, which isn't to say much, but he's starting to slowly document it alongside taking some wicked pictures, and I think that can really speak volumes about what it is that you can go out and see if you were in New Mexico, and then beyond that, if you were to be a New Mexico native like I am and really not know that there is more to these, big hulking mountains than meets the eye, right? So like in terms of the Sandias, those are what's behind Albuquerque. Those are the ones where you see the big peak that sits at what, 12,000? What's the highest peak?
It's more than that because they're taller than the Manzanos. The Manzanos are like 13, close to 13, I think.
I thought the Manzanos were 10,000.
I don't know.
Isn't that what the peak
We should
was?
probably look that up.
We should. We don't know what we're talking
Young
about.
Jamie?
He's missing. He called in today.
Damn it.
No, but for real though. So there's many points all over the world where you can hit the top of the peak, right? So you go anywhere. But in New Mexico in particular, we have a couple different ranges that follow along the Rockies. The one that's down here where we're at is the Manzanos. So Jared's basically been using that area as a stomping ground for exploring. So tell me, what would be, I don't know, a good story out of that area? Like, what's one of your favorite areas?
You know what's funny?
There?
Okay, I guess the very first time I got out there, I was real young, and my dad took me and my brother out driving, and we drove around the mesa out there, and we got to drive his truck, and that was like the first time we drove a vehicle, and it was real exciting or whatever, and so I knew of the area. And one day, I got a book from my mom, and what was the book called? It was called Mysteries and Miracles of New Mexico. And one of the stories in there was about lost treasure in New Mexico. And for some reason, I got really into that. I started researching lost treasure tales and stuff, and I found a book. And in the book, in the Manzano Mountains, there's actually a tale of a mine that was manned by the Native Americans.
Were they doing that under duress, or were they doing that of their own free will?
Yeah, they were captive Native
slaves, for lack of a better
according to the legend.
We'll call it lore.
So they had the rebellion, and after they had the rebellion, they killed all the guys that were making them run the mine, and they covered it up. So apparently, all the gold is still lost. Now, this is again the legend. So I thought,
hold on. So they mined it first, or it is a mine that could have gold in it?
They mined it, and they at some point had some gold in there that wasn't shipped out yet. And there was a revolution. There was, I'm not sure when it was, but it was in what would be the Isleta Indians actually revolted. Not a revolution. It was a revolt against all these guys who made them work, because why the hell would you want to? That's stupid. So they had this revolt or whatever, and they ended up burying the mine, and it's full of gold, according to the legend. There was something in there about a hunter who had found it at one point, and he slipped on a rock and he slid into a cavern and found 2 dead bodies, and he was of Hispanic descent, and they believed that messing with a dead body could get you a curse or something along that line. So he left it and never found it again, was the story. And it's all a story, and there's so many of them across this entire state because the state is so old, and there's so many different legends and history behind the state. But that got me out there. It got me hiking. I would just go out there all the time. And I started out driving my mom's Durango to the bottom of the mountain. I would park there, and I would walk around in the foothills. And the entire time I would have like my eyes swiveling around, looking around for a bear or a mountain lion because I just thought that I was going to get attacked at any moment when I was a young kid out there. I started hiking as soon as I had my learner's permit. I was out there by myself.
Driving out there. Well, I've driven, and of course, I've driven from Albuquerque, so it'll take something like an hour at least to get to these areas that we're talking about. So it's just south of Albuquerque and what they would call the Manzano Mountains. But you would be looking at a long stretch, and again, we're not Googling this, but it's Manzano Mountains, and I would imagine that the stretch is at least 20 miles for the bigger part of it, for the main part of it.
Yeah, and there's foothills, and there's the mountains go all the way down past almost Cevaita. There's that little canyon there that you can drive through, but even past that, the mountain range is still up. I've never been down in that area except for that one time. We found that rattlesnake. We found that ruin out there.
The one that was like a house half built?
Yeah, we found that, and there was that big old rattlesnake. We seen the skin, and we started looking around and almost stepped on the damn snake that shed it. That was cool.
So New Mexico is rife with rattlesnakes, of course. The only time
very good creatures. They're not this demon lizard. They're not an audible rope with it.
My ex-girlfriend was actually a rattlesnake. She was really, really good in bed. She was really good at injecting things to the conversation.
She had a terrible bite, though.
That's terrible jokes.
Shit would get amputated after her bite. Don't let her mouth get anywhere around you.
So I want to come back to a few things. One being that you do hike, but you hike with a slight disability, and I do want to highlight that purely because I think that a lot of people could use that as an excuse.
Yes,
and you don't.
I am slightly retarded, but I still make it through the mountains. I've got lost a few times, but I end up coming out just fine.
The government gives him money for his inability to be able to.
I can't distinguish the different taste of crayons. I've tried so many times. Every color tastes the same to me.
Okay, now we're gonna talk about it. So Jared is missing a part of his leg, but it's not anything that would be like. I don't think that it's something that people cry about. I think it's one of those things that's just like, fuck, that sucks, because it's not like your entire leg. So
I'm missing my foot. They amputated my foot.
Yeah, they amputated your foot, but you've got to use a prosthesis all the way up to your knee. Prosthesis? Did I say it right?
I don't know.
Is that the word?
I wear one.
Prosthetic. Yeah.
I'm not one to judge.
I can't even hike probably 5 days a week, but I think that Jared probably could. Dude, you're out there all the time. Like, what the fuck?
I'm always somewhere poking around, walking through something, looking at something.
Yeah, with a piece of carbon fiber as your foot, right? Do I have that right?
It's carbon fiber, carbon graphite, duct tape, whatever I got laying around that I used to put it together.
And then you broke it at one point, right? While you were in the mountains, like that was a legitimate thing?
I broke one of them one time. I went for a hike and I had a crack in my leg. And I went out from my car walking up in this area on the backside of the Manzano Mountains in a place called Red Canyon off of Pine Shadows.
Yeah.
And I'm out walking around. And I get out of my Jeep and I walk for about 30 minutes and I hear this loud crunch and I look down and the bottom portion of my prosthetic leg had fallen off. And I was about, again, 30 minutes from my car. My leg had just broken in half and I just kind of sat down for a while and I looked at it and thought about what to do. And I ended up tying my shoe to the bottom of I took my prosthetic foot out of my shoe and I tied it to the bottom of my prosthetic so I'd have something to walk with. And I grabbed a stick and it took me about an hour and a half to walk back to my Jeep. I fucking drove straight home. I got my spare leg on and I drove right back out to the mountains because I wasn't going to give up on that hike.
I didn't know that shit,
I drove straight back to the mountains with my spare prosthetic on and I hiked around the rest of that fucking hike.
Hey, I'll tell you what, man. That's what I'm talking about. So that's what's awesome. That's what brings the I say the originality, the authenticity to Live New Mexico, purely because I think that you've gone through, and that's just one scenario. We got more to come, but that's just one scenario, which to me it kind of beats all odds because how bad is it? I go hiking, I might, worst case scenario, sure. Anybody could break a leg or do something like that. But to know that you're going out there with something that could possibly strand you out there, that's huge, So beyond that, as much as he may not say so, I think that some of your hikes are just ridiculously epic, man. There was a mine that the guy took me to here. What was it, a copper mine or a gold mine?
I think it was called the Lone Wolf one. I actually found that through a geocaching website. There was a geocache there. I had no idea about
geocaching.
So the geocaching, for those of you who don't know, is you use a GPS to find like a a certain spot that somebody's hid a box or a bucket, or sometimes they use ammo
Anything?
cans, and you go use your GPS to find it, and you exchange stuff in there. Sometimes people put magnets or trinkets, or there's been dead birds placed in there. There's actually one on the International Space Station. There's one on the North Pole. I don't know if it's as big as it used to be. It was really big for a while, but it's just this thing that I was doing for a while where I get my GPS and I'd go find all these spots, and I found this mine. And we went in there, and there was a fucking skunk in the mine. Wasn't there a skunk in the mine at that time? I remember there was a dead raccoon in there, and in the back there was a skunk.
Yeah. Oh, I remember you couldn't see unless you had a flashlight, and that was like key because you go to walk in there, and it's like, oh, I got this. And then as you go, like the deeper you go into the little cave, because it's on the side of a little hill. It's not like you think of a cave, you think of a big cave. No, this is a man-made cave that somebody dug out, or a group.
Yeah, and the shape of it was actually the backwards F. There was one big long hallway that went straight to the back, and one fork off that went straight, and then about halfway up it there was another.
And then there was some
right
weird like little divots that they tried to like kind of start a tunnel. I think they were digging or something.
I don't know enough about mining. I know that you probably shouldn't be in there, but they're still fun to explore.
And it was old as shit. But go ahead. Sorry.
You got to be really careful when you go in there too, because you never know if you're gonna walk in and there's gonna be a bear or a cave-in, or like crazy people who like to smoke meth in mines, because this is New Mexico. The blue shit, Breaking Bad. And all that. It's just
that totally makes. That's where they cook it. They actually found this mine, and this is fuck the RV.
Well, I didn't know that you could mine it. I thought it was a made product, but apparently they're out there mining it too.
My bad. It's misunderstanding the whole time. They mine it. It
wasn't Breaking Bad. It was breaking back from all this fucking work that we're doing in the mine. Okay, I was I was out there actually today. I was out hiking, not making meth. I haven't done that in a long time.
Or finding it, mining it.
No. Okay. I was out hiking in the Manzanos today. Actually, I went for a nice hike. My parents were kind enough to pick my son up from school, so I didn't have to be there when he got out of school. Which I don't like to hike when I have to go get him from school, because I don't want to get fall down or break my leg again or whatever and end up.
I would stranded. Be there, but
this phone seems to be sticking out of my skin at a weird angle.
Well, I had cell service on the top of the mountain. It's the weirdest
thing. When I rolled
thing.
down, it didn't work after that.
You're right.
I was up there today. I just climbed up to the top of this, just whatever random point I go.
Let's make a deal. You guys meet me halfway. And then
I'll keep rolling down if you start walking up. No. There was a few spots today where I was like, man, I swear to God, I need to stop listening to the side of my brain that wonders what the smell of socks smell like after they've been used for too long. I mean, I go to these spots and I'm like, yeah, I should walk down there. And then I start walking down like, why the fuck did I listen to myself? I shouldn't have walked down here, I start sliding and
so were you?
I dropped my phone. The only reason I knew I dropped my phone is I was listening to music and it started crackling and I go touch my pocket. I had to walk back up the fucking hill. I almost fell down just to find my phone. It was about 30 feet above me.
That's cool. It's a worthy cause, bro. Like if you didn't have your phone, like life wouldn't be right. I mean, I can understand. Do you think honestly, that we use our phones too much? Like you're more of an outdoorsy guy than anybody, but like just generally speaking, do you feel
too
like
much? It's all relative though. I mean, too much to what? 50 years ago, there was no such thing as using your phone. So yeah, compared to that, we use it way too much.
So what was your daily grind? You're in 1950. We're not Googling anything here. We're gonna think about it here. 1950. Okay, so I come home. I do anything. I'm driving sometimes, and I just pull up the news. That's horrible. Whatever. I mean, I don't do it whilst I'm driving every 5 seconds. But there's times when I'll run into a traffic jam. One place you probably shouldn't be doing that, but I'll have it up. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Oh, move. Okay. Oh, stop. Okay. Let's
yeah, and in the 1950s, you'd have been driving home thinking about if you're gonna send her to the moon tonight or not because she didn't make your lunch today the way you wanted it,
or get bombed by Russia. There's a combination of things.
We all have desks. I mean, as long as you brought a desk home from the classroom, you were safe. If Russia was going to bomb us,
just cover your head. It's all good.
There was no worries at that time. And then again, we didn't know what was going on unless the government told us. I say we as if I was there.
You were there.
They didn't know what was going on unless the government told them or the radio or some crackly news source.
So let's talk for real though. Okay, so if you felt that the exposure to a phone happened from as early on as your boy who's 7, right? Your 7-year-old boy. If the exposure happened as early as he has had it or earlier that you have had the cell phones in your adult life, right? You're born in what, 89, 80, 87?
87. We come from that weird generation. We're right in the middle, man. We got to grow up halfway, right? And then they thrust all this shit in our face.
Well,
I remember riding bikes at home and then thinking, man, I wish I could play some video games, but only my friend has it. I didn't have one at the time because they just came out with something. Yeah, you know, they had the Sega and Super Nintendo and all that, but the 64 was coming out and everything. You know, the internet barely got going when we were growing up. I remember days.
Hell, I think it was being mainstreamed right around 90 something. There's no way, because I think the first picture that actually hit the internet, and please check me, but I want to say 1993 is the earliest picture to ever be produced to the internet.
That they're willing to admit.
I'm brain Googling this. Are you guys ready for that? And if I'm right, I win $1,000 from GE Electronics for a new monkey washer, and it has to have the conditioning thing to it. GE,
does it have the banana dispenser as well?
The banana dispenser is the only way to go. If you don't go with the banana dispenser, then your monkey
How come
won't
runts don't taste like actual bananas?
They don't, right? But I love the banana ones. I will choose those over all of them.
I wonder if that's like a common thing. You think if they got rid of all the other flavors, people would be like, thank you. When I was eating sugar, the banana ones were the best ones to go to. I stopped eating sugar. I was fat. I still am, but I was fat also, and I didn't want to die of a heart attack.
He's like a fat girl inside of a skinny guy's body. I have the same problem.
I don't think that makes any sense.
It does.
It really doesn't.
It does. Or a fat guy. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be misogynistic. Is it misogyny? Misogynistic? Is that the word? Is that
just take your chauvinism and walk.
That's the word too.
Out the door.
There's a bunch of them.
I forget. I don't even know what to classify myself as. I'm just an asshole.
Misogynistic. Cell phones though, for real. And the reason why I say so is because you hike probably more often than not. So your boy is 7, and then you take him with you to the mountains.
Yeah, sometimes. When I can.
Okay, and then
he hates it. It's the worst thing in the world to him. He hates it. I know one day he's going to love it when he gets older because I used to take him, but for right now he does not like that I take him to the mountains.
And what is his excuse?
Well, there's no YouTube in the mountains, which of course my cell phone goes out there, but there's not that good a service, so he can't watch YouTube. And he trips when he's trying to.
My 2-year-old does the same thing, and he has to have the 2, and he has to have at least we'll give him a 10-minute span, and God, if he doesn't enjoy that 10 minutes, like he's hooked, man. And I had a coworker today tell me the same thing. Tell me, my 2-year-old likes to stare at and I only give her an hour. I'm like, how do you give your kid an hour of television? So let me ask you, when I was a kid, bro, I remember, okay, 2, I don't remember, but let's just say as early as I can remember, like clearly, I would say like 6. I want to say the most time I was spending when I was indoors was playing Mortal Kombat or something stupid. But as the moment that the interaction died, that was when I went back outside, and that's what I think is lacking nowadays. Like people that binge watch, kids specifically that binge watch anything, I feel like they're missing the interaction. Like even video games, how much interaction do you have?
I don't know.
You have to decision make and coordinate and
Well, video games do bring something. They bring an escape. It's like reading a book or watching TV. So your parents will argue with you that video games are terrible because they came from a generation where watching a TV is perfectly fine. You sit in front of the TV and watch 75 shows, and that's fine. But if you sit in front of a video game, you're wasting your life.
Right.
Which doesn't make any sense to me because there was probably people before them who were like, you guys sitting here reading books.
You all know exactly what we're talking about. Any millennial cats out there, you know what's going down. I had my mom hunt my ass up when I would not do exactly as was asked. And in particular, the usual as was not asked was like, hey, go take out the trash. Mom, let me have 5 more. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm going to date myself right now. So with Halo, I had the original Xbox and Halo 1. And then I got a job at GameStop. Fuck yeah. At 15, and I was there while they released Halo 2. This is America, bro.
Never played Halo, actually.
Not even, are you serious?
I watched a guy play it one time. No, I don't think I've ever touched a controller with Halo being in the console.
Dude, okay. All right. So we all know about video games if you're from anywhere where there's electricity and
Battlefield.
Yeah, so let's just an internet, right? So we know these things. So before there was internet, broadband, widespread, I guess, and it was affordable, whatever the problem was, Xbox original days, my thing was always playing Halo with the homies. And even if you only had one console, you could do 4 controllers on each console and connect the consoles together. Dude.
It was a LAN party. You had a LAN party.
You had a LAN party.
You know, it's funny.
Right, computers had it before. I won't lie. I mean, I know.
So for the longest time, I used to play video games. I still occasionally dabble in this and that. I'm a big Fallout fan.
He used to play video games, but
when I go hiking, I'd be up there in the middle of the mountains, and when I'm like, it's too cold, or I've been hiking forever and I'm tired, I start to think about playing video games, which I find totally funny because when I'm sitting there playing too many video games, all I want to do is go outside and go hiking. And it's this weird, like it would be this weird, thing where when I'd be in the woods at the very end, when I'm walking back down to my car, I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna go home, chill out, and just play a video game. And I'm sitting there 4 hours and 5 hours into Fallout, and I'm really thinking, man, I need to get up and get outside and go climb a mountain or something.
Yeah.
Like that,
Yeah.
And there's never an in between. It's just like if I'm doing one, I got to do the other. If I'm doing the other, I got to do one. I don't really play that many video games now, but I like to get home.
And I won't lie to you. Like, I don't play as much. I mean, the things I've been working on lately is throwbacks, man. And I say that purely chronologically, right? So you think chronologically, Mad Max I'm playing right now. I'm still playing a little bit of Battlefield. The next thing that I'm watching out for, and I might catch some grief for this.
Throwback, and you say Mad Max, I think you're like throwing back to yesterday. Is that when you're like, was that the throwback that far? Did you throw back?
No, the game came out like 2014, bro. If I was to try to talk about,
okay, I'm playing on my DS. All right. I'm playing Ocarina of Time on my DS.
Wrong word.
That's a throwback. I play on my phone. I play Link to the Past, on my phone.
All right. My furthest throwback was a a pirated version of a perfect RPG, and it may rhyme with Melder Poles, just like Elder Scrolls. Weirdest thing how they sound the same, but they're just not related at all.
I don't think I played the first one.
Yeah. I haven't played the first two, but
Melder's Poles?
Melder Schmoles.
Oh, and it's Zelda Rolls. Yeah, that's the one where you can like name your special ring that makes you invisible, and after 37 moves of the controller, you can pull out your sword and attack the skeleton that has already raped you 7 times.
But they have exactly. They have a bone organ that you didn't know existed, and once they become skeleton form, they have bone dicks. Just they have
I've obviously never
noise.
been around too many skeletons because I forgot that part. He just rubbed his bones on me.
Dare you click clacking sound.
Rapes are not a joke.
It's not a joke.
They're not a joke. Sexual. It's just
really not.
When you get raped by a skeleton, that is not a joke.
Okay. You get really upset that you were not faster than a skeleton, though.
So when's the last time you went hiking? When's the last time you've been in the woods?
Video games and hiking, they go hand in hand. Live New Mexico.
What doesn't go? I mean, for me, everything goes with hiking. I have gone from my car, got out, put my backpack on, got whatever else I'm taking, my gun. I always take my gun with me, except for the time I forgot it when I was like 14 because I didn't have one. And I was out there walking around in the snow.
I don't have a fucking gun, bro.
I was walking around in the snow, and I had an axe. And I don't know why I had an axe because I was watching Survivor Man at the time, and this was like part of so that came out around the same time I started hiking.
You need an axe. You can't go to the mountains without some
I don't have one anymore, but at the time,
shit.
I brought my axe with me.
Well, the thought was that, if you didn't have a gun, you had an axe, right?
I was going to chop down a tree and build a house to stop the bear that was attacking me.
Makes sense.
So I'm walking around with this fucking axe, and it's snowing like crazy up there in the mountains. And I'm walking around in the snow, fresh snow. Nobody's been up there yet because it just started snowing, so I could tell because there was no tracks. And I'm walking around, and I get this really weird feeling. It felt so awkward up there. And I feel like something's watching me. And, I was really young. I was probably 16, 17 years old walking around up there. So I'm walking around, and I actually, I go up about, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of a mile. And I say, you know what, I'm going to go up this hill that's right next to me. Instead of going straight back behind me, I'm going to go up this hill. I walk up the hill, kind of exploring. I come back down on my own tracks about 500, 600 feet from where I went up the hill. And there's freaking tracks in the snow. And I'm not, at the time I was 17 years old. I didn't know.
What kind of tracks?
I'm pretty sure they were mountain lion tracks, man. And that was what was giving me that feeling back there, So
now we're in the Manzanos.
Yeah, that was in the Montanos. That was in what's the name of that camp trail? There's so many different trails up there that I hike on.
Then there's the different names that they're known by as well.
There's like Water Pipe Canyon and Monte Largo and Trigo and JFK and all these other ones. But yeah, that was one of the trails I was hiking in that I guess I got followed by a mountain lion. Like I said, I was 17. There was tracks in the snow behind my tracks, and they weren't there when I walked through it. So something was there. Never seen it, but I just had this really bad feeling when I was out there. Sometimes it still happens to me to this day. I've gone through some spots where I know something's watching me.
But hiking. But in the same breath, though, would you say that you've seen wildlife Is as many times as you've probably felt as nervous by it. Like
funny enough, so six times maybe I've run into bears in the Manzanos.
And you've actually seen them and stuff.
I've seen them.
Yeah,
I was really close to one time.
Did they hunt the Manzanos for bears, or how does that work?
They do. So, and I actually read something about that. In areas where they hunt predators obviously would be more scared of humans. They hunt mountain lions in the Manzanos. They hunt bears in the Manzanos. So these animals naturally are wary of humans. Every bear I've ever run into in the Manzanos has been turning around and running away from me as soon as I saw it.
Yeah, I've never seen a bear that turns and fights out here. Black bears, right?
We get black bears. Okay. I think way back in the day when people first started coming around here, and hunting and killing animals for no reason. Just because they were afraid of them, there were still grizzly bears in this area. In fact, there's actually jaguars in New Mexico. Jaguars are coming back to New Mexico from Mexico.
I was going to say, I know that they're supposed to be more.
Jaguars will hunt and kill people. They won't eat them. They will hunt and kill people. I don't know. They might eat them. Hell if I know. But I know that they're one of the predators who will actually directly hunt human beings, and they're coming back to New Mexico. I love hiking here. It's amazing.
Live New Mexico.
That's part of it. That's what I do. I live in New Mexico. I was out in the Ladrone Mountains a couple weeks ago.
Now the Ladrone's part of Rockies, right?
The Ladrones are they're called a sky island or something like that, where they're just basically like a part of the earth that's been pushed up in a random area where there's nothing else around it. Like a mountain range is a long stretch of earth that's been pushed up. The crust tectonic plates.
Sure, miles and geography, miles, like the Rockies or the
scientific words. We're going to throw those out there. And they've been pushed up. Well, the Ladrones are not a volcano because a lot of these singular mountain type terrain, features that you see when you look out on the landscape, when you see this one little hill, a lot of them are volcanoes in New Mexico. There's a lot of volcanic activity. The Ladrones are south of Belen. They're 70 miles from Albuquerque. They're a little bit south of Belen on the west side of I-25. And they're just out there. You would miss them if you weren't paying attention.
Well, there's no water near them, so I feel like they get less populated than any of the lakes.
The Rio Salado is a drainage type, it's an arroyo, but it doesn't flow with water. Although the name is Rio Salado, which is like some type of river. It's just not fed in the same sense like the Rio Grande is fed by the Colorado Rockies.
Hold on, podcastians. We're going to go for some Googling here. Salado. Continue.
The Rio Salado is a drainage that leads from the south end of the Ladrones into the Rio Grande. And the interesting thing about this arroyo is, so back in the day, this was a Wednesday, Dane Cook. Let's go with that. Okay, back in the day, people would come from Mexico into Santa Fe, and they would, or wherever, they would come from Mexico into different parts of the country, different parts of the state. And when they were walking on the El Camino Real, does that sound right? Coming from Mexico, they would take this trail from down there to up here, and they would pass by the Ladrones. The word Ladrone actually means thief in Spanish. So the Sierra Ladrones are... Thief.
Yeah.
The Sierra Ladrones...
Robert, we Googled it, so it's legit.
Supposedly are named after all these people who would rob the pack trains moving up and back and forth from Mexico. Another one of these treasure stories I read about had to do with the Ladrones.
Because you always told me that there was gold supposedly stored there.
So supposedly these guys would rob the pack trains and they would go hide up in the Ladrones because there's so many canyons up there. And I hadn't been up there. I went up there one time with a buddy of mine, and he ended up getting a cactus in his face. We found like an arch up there. We messed with some coyotes, but we didn't really do much exploring. We did a little bit of hiking, seen some deer and stuff like that. I went up there the other day, 2 weeks ago, and I found some old ruins out there. I found a whole bunch of mines, all kinds of weird...
At the Ladrones?
Yeah, I found some mines up there. I found this really weird area where they had like a concrete slab poured, and they had excavated a ton of dirt. They didn't like dig a hole straight down. They just took all the dirt out of there instead of, digging like a shaft.
Okay, so that's touching on something. So did you feel like it was government or private land that you were walking on? Like, is there signs or something?
No, you know what? There was a sign there, and it was I'm pretty sure I was on the BLM part. The south end of the Ladrones is in the Cevaita wildlife reserve.
Refuge
So
or whatever.
yeah. So I mean, you're not supposed to be in there, but they always have signs that have like the duck or something on it. The spot I was in, there was a gate and it said no vehicle access after this point, but it was BLM land. And there was the ruins up there. They were pretty cool, and they're actually on my site. I got a couple of pictures I posted on there. I got some good black and white ones. There was some that actually had the door frame in them still, and were like 4 feet tall. You know, they were rock. It was a rock house, and they didn't have the roof on it anymore. Or I don't know if it ever did.
Who would have made these? Like, what was there? People that own the land?
So I think it was at one time the government was trying to get people to rent in that area, and they built these subsidies out there. You know, and they wanted people with low income people to be renting in this area. Right, there was no utilities or anything, but they were still going to charge exorbitant amounts for rent. And of course, you know, the milk trucks wouldn't be able to get out there. I don't know.
How dare you? It's got a nice view.
The history of the mountain, that particular spot in the mountain, I guess there was, you know, people farming. There was probably people out there. It had to be ranching, sheep, cows, stuff like that. It had to be one of them, as far as I know. I don't know. I didn't do enough research. I just found these old rock buildings and took some really cool pictures. And I looked in some mines and I tried not to fall in them. I was successful as not falling in the mines because they were straight down, I mean, like 40 feet.
You're not. No, you don't feel dead.
Yeah, I don't think I got left out there because I was hiking today and I almost died. So I flirt with death enough that I know when she's around because I know death is a she.
But did you find water out there? Here, the drones don't have any water, right? Isn't that like supposed to be one of the big things?
I didn't like. There was not that I could think. Well, there was actually on the bottom of that weird excavation. There was a puddle. Full of water, but I don't think there's any running water. If that's what you're asking,
like we'd see out of the Manzanos, because I know for a while
today there was so much water in the Manzanos. I would say that today the Manzanos were moister than an oyster.
Was it? Is it wetter?
And the wetter is better. It is better when it's wetter.
The wetter is
but
better.
It is more slippery. So my feet got wet a few times. Other things, my feet did get wet. I tried not to fall in the water because I had my camera with me, which got a little banged up today.
So you hike probably, I would say, at least each month out of the 12 that we get on this glorious circle we do around the Big Star. And in doing so, would you say that more often than not, there's fair weather to go out there hiking in New Mexico? Like, if you were to say, as a general explanation, you would think that there'd be fairer weather for the majority of the mountain ranges.
My opinion on that is that if I waited for the weather to be good hiking weather, I wouldn't go hiking. What was it? It's been raining for the last 2 weeks straight. I mean, it's been raining insane amounts of water. Just today,
so I've been watching
fine.
That crazy show where the dude, I think it's called, it's Monster something.
Monster High?
It's called Monster Hunter or something like that, where the guy hunts like the gigantic fish. Monster
High with the teen.
Yeah, the high school.
Yeah,
the vampires. Fucking asshole. No, the dude hunts these gigantic fish, and he was looking for grouper, and he's out in the Florida Everglades, and the dude's like, "Hey, there's a storm coming. We got this," and they hang out until literally they have to bail at top speed, going in one direction towards the beach.
So last 2 weeks ago, whenever I was out there in the Ladrones, it was getting really cloudy where I was at, and I was like, you know what, I need to leave. So I get in my Jeep and I drive home, and literally 5 minutes after I get inside and start editing my pictures and stuff, it just starts, I hear this tapping on my window. What the hell is that noise? I look outside and it just starts gushing. It was one of the days in Belen where all over Facebook and everything, they're talking about all this flooding because there was, 6 inches of rain, and we don't get that in New Mexico, so everybody freaks out. Other places in the world, you'll get 4 or 5 feet of rain, and they're like, "Oh, that's a Tuesday. That's why we built our house on stilts." But over here, everybody's like, "Oh my God, we got 6 inches of rain," and they start freaking out and losing their minds.
Hey, I will echo that with New Mexico drivers, because New Mexico drivers can't handle an inch of rain.
I think drivers in general just don't do well with change.
This is true.
It's the fact that in New Mexico we don't get rain. If we got rain every day, everybody would be like, "Oh, it's normal." They're like, "Oh my God, we got so much rain. I didn't put new wipers on because we never got it before." So
I won't lie to you. I'm that guy that you can see. It almost looks like my windshield wipers have dreadlocks because there's shit flying. I hit the button. It's
I can't barely see out of my window. There's so many cracks on it. So the windshield wipers don't do too much other than just shred themselves on the cracked windshield.
I don't mind where I live though, because at least it's all paved. Where I lived before, so far south, I would always have.
We got to knock on wood at this point, but in New Mexico, we really don't get anything natural disaster wise. We'll have a little bit of a fire. Maybe it gets cold. It got down to like -20 or something.
Right.
Wasn't it like really cold at one point?
And they had to send out like the National Guard to do some blanket
because
and
people's pipes busted. But in other parts of the world, they get flooded and people drowned, and fires burn down entire cities and everything. In New Mexico,
how dare you? They have Red Cross.
We had a tornado,
and judge them,
and a couple of people's mobile homes got shifted, maybe 80 feet into another town. But other than that, it was not a big deal.
I think one of the biggest things to take away from New Mexico as well is that you don't have any problems with constant ideas about what you should be doing with land. As terrible as it is to say, like, there's of late, right? Would I be right in saying that there's this new legislation where they're trying to push to reduce the size of the protected land in New Mexico? Are you familiar with this at all?
Well, they're trying to sell protected land in New Mexico.
Right. Now I want to say this is part of the administration that we have of late, which would be Susana Martinez, and what she's doing is trying to play in line with the federal government, which is part of that administration, the Trump administration, basically saying across the board that there's no need to spend so much money protecting X amount of land. We could have Y amount of land. And in doing that, there's been a lot of calling to, the federal reps, which I feel like is governors, which I feel like is, people that are closely linked to New Mexico.
I actually have a link on my site. I think it's change.org.
Yeah.
There's a link on my site to sign a petition to not allow them to sell our land. It's public land. A lot of people don't realize it, that, the places that I go hiking, yours too. You can go out there and do whatever you want. Don't go out there and shit all over my trail or something.
Right. So we're talking about Manzano, the Manzano Range. Is that mostly BLM or?
The Manzano Range is actually in the Cibola National Forest. So the BLM, I believe BLM owns.
What does BLM stand for?
Bureau of Land Management.
And then they're a federal agency, right?
Yeah, I think so. They deal with a lot of the land that just kind of gets in the middle. It's not this real pretty scenic land or something. They do a lot of different things. They regulate people's grazing and stuff like that. Strange things.
Yeah, and the other thing that they also handle too, which is big, that I think a lot of people don't understand about federal agencies or the programs, but a lot of the things that they do is like leasing, and they'll lease to farmers to be able to have their cows be able to graze the land. And the purpose of that is twofold. One, to fund part of BLM's, it's just like their operational costs come from that leasing, but in the same breath, that those cows, as much as I guess you can call them an invasive species, they are actually trimming the land, right?
I hate those cows. They destroy the trails and the mountains. They shit on Today there's cow shit everywhere you go.
I will say that the trails get fucked up because
the cows mess them up. The BLM actually does mining and oil stuff too. They manage all that.
See, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand why we can't have the Republican Party come together to kind of understand that we're not. I don't think it's like a big divide. It's just more of like a mutual understanding. Like, hey, we get it. Like, there's money being spent on areas that may not be addressed by any of the public for X amount of days or years, even. Where you got like something like the Appalachians, where you would have people that go out of their way to spend months in those mountains, and I think that those would be more. Put in like the public spotlight, you know what I mean? If something was to happen, whereas down here, let's see. So Silver City, what's the range around there? What's
Gila?
The Gila's. That was the supposed to be the first mountain range that was protected.
Yeah, was it Roosevelt?
Yeah, and
one of those presidents went out there, and John Muir was in that area. He did a lot of stuff out there.
Who's that?
He's a famous outdoorsman type person.
Well, and just to say, I know that for a fact that that area down there was supposed to be the first to be protected federally by the U.S., and then that kind of contributed to a program that expanded to the entire continental. I mean, anywhere across the U.S., you're going to see spots that are protected in almost every state.
And, but to go back into the kind of veer the conversation in another direction, like one of the best things about New Mexico is that you can go 50 miles in any direction and end up in a totally different area. I mean, you want to go maybe a little more than 50 miles, but you go down there to White Sands and you have this amazing sand dune, almost like a desert. It's this totally different area where there's white sand and it's just white, and there's all these different creatures out there that are amazing animals that have adapted to that environment. They live out there. You can find pronghorns.
I've got to bring it up, man. So your Live New Mexico is a blog.
Yes. Ish.
Yeah, blog-ish, and then this would be your first podcast for it, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully some more to come of that, possibly after excursions, pre-excursions, on and so forth. But beyond that, would you say that like you visited White Sands, you visited all these spots? Would you take a GoPro with you? Would you start a YouTube channel? Are you going to do that? Is that going to become a thing?
When I get the funding, I will buy me a GoPro. I want to buy me like a camper, a fifth wheel or something like that to drag around all over the state. And that's all I want to do is just film. I want to go out and film. I have a job, and you ask somebody, what do you do? And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm an electrical engineer. That's what I do. That's me. And I'm not like that. I could care less what my job is. It doesn't make me who I am. My job pays a few bills so I can go do what I like to do. But
so what are you trying to do by showing people? What do you want people to see?
And I was thinking about this today, and I don't really have a goal. It's not that I have a goal with what I'm doing. I like the things that I do. I love the experiences that I have, and I like other people to see that. And I want, other people to realize that not only, so I may have this issue with my leg or whatever. I have a kid, I have a job, and I still get to go outside and explore and see. Today I was out hiking, and just for example, I found a horny toad, this enormous horny toad. And when I walked up on it, it was so cold this morning. When I woke up, it was like the first cold day we've had at this time of the year.
I think we had our first cold warning, freeze warning last night.
So this guy, he's just sitting there, and he's got his whole body tilted facing the sun. And the horny toads, they kind of can change the color of their skin. A lot of reptiles have this ability to kind of darken their skin, like a chameleon, but not as people think a chameleon can just go to invisible or polka dot or whatever. It doesn't work like that. But they can kind of darken their skin up so they get that extra sunlight. And I just found him today when I was out there hiking. I come out there and I find this horny toad. One of those pictures is going to end up on my site. So you'll be able to see. I might throw in a little comment about how I found this horny toad. I actually found a bunch of crows out in the middle of a field, the mesa out there. And I went to go walk out there on my way up to the mountains, and I come across this horny toad. And that's just it. That's what I like, is that I never know what's going to happen. I get up and I go hiking, and my goal isn't anything. It's just to be outside and just whatever happens.
No, that's awesome. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's huge, man. Like, I think a lot of people can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that at all.
People can say that. They can say they can't do it.
Sure. No,
what do I do? I wake up and I go hiking.
If I didn't have such a weird schedule, I would love to do it. And I say schedule because I have a job like most people do, which is like a 9 to 5, but I really prefer, so you work what? You work your Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then you have your 4 days off.
Every week.
It's amazing.
It's the only reason I keep that job.
But something for that is that, it allows you to do these things. And then we get to kind of go along with you because you go on these trips, and then you get to blog about them, even if they're in short, if in jest, you're just there to kind of fuck around. Because you were on this thing where you were out and about, but of late, right, this last summer, you were doing catfishing, right? That was like your main.
Yeah, I was out, actually all summer. Broke up with some girl, some shit was going on, I get out, I go to my buddy's house, and I walk in, and he's like, hey, what's going on? He's like, you feel like fishing today? I was like, dude, I haven't fished in years. Hell yeah, let's go. One day we went fishing, caught like 4 or 5 catfish up there in Albuquerque, and after that, I did not stop catfishing this entire summer.
So you went to Elephant Butte, right?
I fished the Rio Grande. I fished the ditches. I fished down in San Marcel. I went all the way to Elephant Butte.
And just for everybody to know, when we say ditches in New Mexico, that's a lifeblood kind of a thing. It's not like ditches you'd get runoff from like a city. You're talking about ditches that actually go to farms and grow crops. So
full of water all year. The ditches we fish are full of water all year.
8 months out of the year, you'll get fish in every part of these ditches all over the place, because before they didn't have this, and you would either pump groundwater or you would deal with seasonal flooding. So in the 30s, they created this amazing system that it basically punctures every part of where you would want to have water, including going back. I mean, because we only have the Rio Grande, and then the Rio Grande is the river that you speak of, and then all the ditches that come off of it would have those same fish in it, right?
Yeah, there's actually a lot more different types of fish than people realize in this area. Again, I hadn't fished in years, and this year, my buddy, he said, "Let's go fishing." I ended up going fishing almost every day for a while. I was going fishing. Every week I was catching some stuff. I ended up going to the Butte. I took this trip down to the Butte, and I fished in this one spot on the north end of the Butte.
So walk me through, if you were to set up for a catfish evening, you had like so you would fish for bait.
So in the beginning, when I first started fishing this season, we were using chicken liver. One of the guys at my work, I told him we were fishing, and the guy said, I fish all the time. I'm going to go with you. And he said, hey, it's a really good bait for catfishing. He said, use carp. And I was like, carp? Well, how the hell am I supposed to catch carp? And I remember like my kid's mom catching carp on worms before. I remember seeing people shooting them with a bow. So I go to the spot that I know about where I used to live. It was right behind the house I used to live at. And there's a whole bunch of carp in this ditch where a sewage treatment plant dumps their like cleaned water back into the ditch, which is not, it smells like shit back there. But there's so many carp in the water there. So I go out there and I fish it. And of course I catch like 3 carp the first time I go and fish it. So I thought I knew what I was doing. I had it down pat that I was going to catch carp every time I went out there. You fillet the carp, you cut them up into little chunks. For people like carp, I'm sorry, but they work really well for catching catfish. So I don't hate them. I just use, there's plenty of spots though. Like that's even true. For me,
there are a lot though. Yeah.
But I've been out. I go around. I've seen these. I've seen places.
Hence the Live New Mexico. And I would never. All I want to do is try to motivate people to go the fuck outside.
Please,
for starters.
Please don't. Just not where I'm at. I don't need people hiking where I'm at. I like to be alone in the woods.